Hello, I'm Karen Long, President and founder of Streamline Government Contracts. Streamline helps small to mid-sized government contractors who seek experienced, effective support with contract management that will help reduce risks, increase profits, and enhance your reputation. We do this by negotiating teaming agreements, subcontracts, preparing estimates at completion, and communicating with the contracting officer in their own language. We are the proud sponsors of Government Contractor Chat. We appreciate you joining us today. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Lindsay. Thanks.
Thank you, Karen. Hello, everyone. I am Lindsay Riegelsberger, Operations Manager and Marketing Specialist for Streamline Government Contracts. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guest speaker now. Bill Bolton, president of BB Insurance, has over 15 years of experience as an insurance professional and dedicates his time to understanding each client's insurance needs and contractual obligations. He is an expert in the federal acquisition regulations and uses his knowledge to more effectively protect his government contracting clientele. Bill's focus is on high-risk, middle market accounts in the areas of government contracting, technology, and construction. Without further ado, Bill Bolton.
And thank you for that introduction, Lindsay. And thank you to everybody for having me here today. So just a couple of notes before I start sharing. I've been told that insurance is not necessarily the sexiest thing out there. So we'll try to have a little bit of fun with this. And we are going to speak on just strictly one topic today, that is cybersecurity insurance, cyber liability insurance. And we're going to keep it at a 50,000 foot level because I can get into the weeds on this stuff, but we're not going to get that deep into it. And it's such a broad topic. It's cyber insurance in particular really is. But we're going to hit a lot of the high notes and go through quite a few things. And before I get going, I always like to talk a little bit about myself and share some things and let you know that I'm not just an insurance robot. And a little bit about me. I'm a big family guy. I've got two young children that are right here. They're Hudson and Claire. This is one of my favorite pictures of my son flicking me off. That one always cracks me up. This is my lovely fiance, Liz. Some other family, my sister, brother-in-law, and their father. His father. This is us at the Masters. If you guys haven't been to the Masters, go check it out. These are my nephews, and we are dog people. We have two dogs, and we babysit this massive Doberman all the time. A little bit more. We're big into rugby. My son has won 4 straight state rugby championships with Loudon Rugby. He's big into football now, so hopefully he'll be playing at Virginia Tech. I'm also a big Hokie. More pictures of family here. Here's my mother, my fiance, and my daughter once again. So I do have a life outside of insurance, although this does consume the vast majority of my time. So now let's get nerdy. So the topics we're really going to focus on today: what does cyber liability mean? Like what really defines it? What it protects? We're going to go into some of the underwriting process because that's a lot of the questions that people have. Like, how do I get into this? What is it going to cost? What are the things that I need to look out for? We'll talk about a few of the pitfalls because not all of these policies are perfect. And there are certain things to be aware of whenever you are, going through the purchasing process. And I've got a few case studies, really examples of things that I've experienced, some things that are affecting everybody right now that does buy this, and really people that don't even buy this particular insurance product. So we'll go into a few details about that stuff. So what is cyber insurance? This, if you ask the Google machine that question, what is cyber insurance? This is the definition they spit back out at you. And it's not really an all-encompassing answer to that question. But there are a couple things that stick out here, and I've highlighted them. The main one is it's a type of insurance designed to cover consumers of technology services, and that's really the operable word. It's designed to do that. And as I mentioned, there are certain pitfalls that we're going to go into and talk about. But it's a much more vast answer than just this, and we're going to try to answer it in many more words. But basically businesses that engage in various electronic activities, such as selling on the internet or collecting data within its internal electronic network. That's a very narrow definition. Cyber insurance, cyber liability means a lot more than just that. And now there's going to be quite a few wordy slides. Try not to read it. I know if you get interested, go ahead and feel free to do so. But I will point out a few, important items within the wordy slides that we have coming up here. So what does it cover? And if you want to go ahead and read through this, you're welcome to, like I said, but I'm going to simplify this. A full cyber liability policy. And I'm not talking about one of the small modules that you might get on a general liability policy. Some of them will throw in a basic $20,000, $25,000 for data breach. It's not a full policy, and it really only covers, first party damages, not third party. So not vendors, not, other people that are related to your company and not within your company. So it's a very limited portion of insurance if you have it on a general liability form. A full cyber policy, it will protect, if you were to compromise somebody's information, and perhaps a large sum of people's personal information, they could sue you for that. So it would cover the defense costs. If there are any damages, if you were found to be liable for all of that, there could be damages awarded. It would pay for any of the damages that are awarded. Once an attack does take place, once the information has been compromised, there are regulatory fines and there are fees that are associated with trying to clean this mess up. It pays for all of that. If there are any credit monitoring that you have to take care of, it pays for that. It even goes as far as if your reputation has been damaged, it'll pay for a PR firm to come in and try to clean up your image. So it really is. It's a very robust form, and it takes care of really everything soup to nuts. One of the items, if you look over here to the right, cyber crime. This is something that is overlooked on a regular basis, and you could throw this into the pitfalls, kind of a section of this conversation. Cyber crime historically was actually written on a management liability policy, and that's some things like directors and officers insurance. Historically, that's where you would find this. So for many years, people that were buying cyber liability insurance had no idea this was not included within their policy. And one of the important ones here is something called social engineering. This is one of the more common types of attacks that people are subject to. And the best example I can give to you is this. It's really when the human element is thrown into the mix. So let's assume you're the CFO of a company. You go out of town on vacation, and your director of finance is there taking care of things. And all of a sudden they get an email from you, the CFO, saying, hey, I forgot to send $100,000 to this, to this account. It has to be done immediately. This is my mistake. Please take care of it right away. And it looks like it comes from their email address. It looks like it's, directly from the CFO while they're on vacation. And so what this tells us is that somebody found out through social engineering, through having conversations or from something, that they recognize that this person's going to be out of town and this is the right time to attack. Your director of finance then goes ahead and sends that $100,000 out to the requested account. It wasn't the account that, the fake CFO that's sending that email was requesting. And now you're out $100,000. This is a very common occurrence. And we're going to go into some statistics in a little bit. But this is something that is overlooked on a regular basis because, again, historically, it's not included directly onto cyber policies. And I'll show you what that looks like here. Actually, next slide, I will. So yeah, underwriting process. This is, I call it getting into the party and staying there. The quantifiers, how the underwriters are going to determine how much this costs. They're really the two driving factors. The two most important ones are your operations. What are you doing? Are you storing, really sensitive information, HIPAA information? anything that's, the government deems to be, very important, classified, or if you're handling information like that, then that is going to drive the cost up. That's going to determine how much things cost. And the other really big driving force is what your gross revenues are. So if you are $100 million business, gross revenue, you're going to pay more for anything, any insurance product than somebody that's doing $1 million. So your revenues and your operations are the two most important driving factors. The other ones are the security measures and protections you have in place. What cybersecurity do you already have in place? And actually the next few lines here go through just a few items of the things that they would look for. This is not the biggest driving factor. This is a question that I get on a regular basis. We have all these things in place. Are we going to be able to save some money on the insurance? Yes and no. I mean, it's a very minor difference. You're not going to move the scale by a whole lot just for having all these things in place. The important part is it's getting past the bouncer. That's why I said getting into the party. When you go to, big fancy nightclub and you got the big guy sitting there at the velvet rope, determining whether or not you're going to get in, that's really what the underwriter's doing. So if you have all those controls in place, that's just getting you into the party. It will affect the price very little, a nominal amount, but it's really just getting into the party. And if you don't have those controls in place, the insurance carriers will most likely just say, no, we're not going to touch this one. So that's really just preliminary things you have to do. So yeah, the underwriters, they want to know if firewalls, antivirus, are you encrypting data in arresting or in transport? Do you have the correct patching procedures? MFA is a real big one, and it's really not that hard to do, particularly if you have remote users. And this day and age, almost everybody does. So data really needs to be encrypted, and you need to be using MFA. If you're missing any one of these things, it doesn't necessarily mean that every carrier is going to say no. They may make recommendations that, hey, you should look into this. But if you have most of it, 99% of the time, you're going to be fine, and we'll be able to find a solution. And keep in mind, when I'm saying, getting into the party, the real party is the big standard market carriers, your Travelers, Hartford, CNA, Chubbs, the ones that everybody has heard of before. There's always more than one solution here. There are hundreds of carriers out there that do write this sort of insurance. It has become more limited though. As there are more and more of these attacks, there are more insurance carriers making it more difficult to get into the party. And in fact, there are entire insurance carriers, multi-billion-dollar carriers, that had some really bad years, and they non-renewed 100% of their cyber policies. They just got out of the entire market altogether. So it is something that the insurance carriers are also aware of. And again, larger companies, and a lot of this is really geared for, small to medium, sized businesses, SMEs. Larger companies, it does get a little bit more complex. Do you have a formal response plan in place? Do you have a CIO, CTO that's handling things in the background? Another thing that's overlooked quite a bit is the more vendors and third parties that you have, it means that you need to spend more time and attention on it. Really make sure that these, third parties, the vendors that you're working with, they also have their own cyber policy. And that's something that you can require by contract. And a lot of these things are required by contract. And of course, you have a larger or an increased risk of human error, because if you're a larger organization, you have more people there, and that just increases the exposure. So one of the items that insurance carriers really like to hear about and like to see, if possible, is any kind of a training program that you have in place for your employees. The more training you do, and I know it's some mundane stuff. I've had to deal with it my entire career. It seems kind of, common sense. Like, if you see something that looks funny, don't click on it. People make mistakes. Everybody does. So that's, again, where a lot of these issues come up, is just from human error, not paying attention. So the more training and the more, in everybody's face, this kind of a training program is, the more likely that they're not going to click on that malicious item, whatever it may be. And Yeah, one note about, contractual requirements. I'd mentioned that you can require this by contract, and I would imagine that many of you have at some point entered into a contract that did require, certain cyber requirements, cyber limits. We're seeing this more and more every single day. The federal government hasn't historically required it much, and nowadays it's almost almost all the contracts that we see come across. It's becoming more prevalent, particularly if you're entering into a contract as a subcontractor. The prime almost always these days requires some cyber element. At least it's happening more frequently. So more about the underwriting process, and this is the slide that I mentioned just a moment ago. These are the kind of questions that, and this is taken directly off of the Chubb website. This is actually, I pulled this off when I was going through one of my clients and actually getting their information loaded into the system. And this is the kind of questions that they ask, the same sort of things that I just brought up a moment ago. And this is just one slide, one of the pages from there on this left-hand side here. There are more questions that they ask than that, but it's, they want to know about the type of information that you're holding on to. Is it being protected? Do you have the right controls in place? And this is just, kind of backing up what I had mentioned before, related to cyber crime. Again, and this is built into this Chubb cyber program, but you have to request it. So your broker would have to request it. And all it takes is clicking one button. And then the underwriter will know that it needs to be underwritten and we need to have something to propose. And it's all the same items that we discussed. And down here is, of course, the social engineering fraud. One other note, this is made for it is $1 million cyber policy. That's what this one was. They will have sublimits. So for things like social engineering, and this is negotiable, you can increase any of these limits. They will typically put a sublimit on it. So they're not going to provide the full $1 million. You can change that. There's more underwriting that you have to go through. And of course, there's a charge for that. But those things can be changed. But they do typically put a sublimit on it. So be aware that if it's a social engineering attack, and they're usually not as major as some of the other occurrences, but it's financially speaking anyways. So be aware there may be a sublimit within your policy for certain items. Just a couple of statistics, and this is information taken off of the Chubb website. Again, I work very closely with that carrier. And so there's, some not so good news and some good news. The bad news is right now that all of these, hacks and all the fixing the problems that arise after a hack, it's only becoming more expensive. The largest cost associated with a cyber attack is forensic analysis. So having hiring a company to come in and figure out what happened, where's the issue, what exactly took place, how do we fix it? That costs more than a lot of the other items. Of course, legal costs, notification cost, and note the price per person, because you have to notify everybody on your system. If your system has been compromised, you have to notify everybody. And the cost per person, it depends on what study you read. It could vary from $30 a person to $130 a person. And in either event, it becomes expensive to send out all these notifications and let everybody know, hey, your information may have been compromised. Target's done it. I'm sure that your bank has sent some information at some point, like, hey, we had an issue. You have to notify everybody, and that does get, more and more expensive. Credit monitoring and PR and crisis response are up there as some of the higher expenses as well. The good news is, and this is silver lining, everybody, it appears that, the business owners are doing a good job of educating their employees, because the likelihood of one of the incidents taking place because of an internal, human error That's actually lowering. So people are doing the right thing. Everybody is aware of the problem. So that's a good sign for people that are buying this type of insurance, that the likelihood for human error has actually dropped over the past few years. So keep training people. It'll help everybody. And a few more statistics, and I'm going to point out some of the highlights of these, again. And I also, it depends on what report you read. All of these statistics are very varying, but the numbers they're relatively close to one another. It's not that major of a delta from one study to another. But specific to small businesses, over 43% of the cyber attacks that we're seeing, and this is a 2020 study done by Verizon, 43%, it's almost half the attacks are aimed at small businesses. And I've written articles about this. The main reason is that small businesses don't have the same, business infrastructure, particularly cyber protection, that type of infrastructure that a medium-sized or a larger company would have. So the bad actors out there, they know it's easier to get in there. So they can get into a small business's system easier, and they can actually, snake their way up the ladder and, towards, a larger target. But it still affects almost half of the cyber attacks affect specific to small businesses. The average cost of data breach for a small business is estimated to be around $3.86 million. This is one of the statistics that I had a bit of a problem with, because I think that number is skewed quite a bit. This is the average. So there have been very, very large attacks that definitely skew these numbers. That's not really a typical one to go with. Typically they'd be, the most of the ones that I've seen, and most of the ones that, that we talk about on a regular basis, are usually less than $1 million. But it does happen. Of course, ransomware, that's on the rise in the recent years. And we're going to talk about a couple of those, examples of those that have taken place recently. That's becoming a major issue, and it really wasn't that big of an issue up until about 5 years ago, and then it's becoming more and more prevalent. Business interruption insurance. This is something that's overlooked as well on a pretty regular basis. What this means is that if you have an attack, and that attack causes you to have to shut your system down, so basically you cannot operate as a business for whatever period of time it takes to fix that problem. If you have cyber business interruption insurance, it would pay for what your revenue typically would have been, so you can keep the lights on. And then they would even pay for you to hopefully operate a temporary system, so you could try to get some work going again. But make sure that whenever you buy this, you do have business interruption insurance attached to the cyber policy, because when you are taken down and this does happen, you're out of luck. And I've got a good example of that. Yeah, I mentioned human error, so I don't want to hit on that too hard right now. And, social engineering as well. That same Verizon report from 2020 noted that 36% of data breaches involve social engineering techniques. And so that human error and social engineering really go hand to hand. And so here's a few case studies, a few examples, and these are two that were directly related to me. This is a government contractor that I worked with. This is right before they became my client. They didn't have any cyber. They weren't aware of, how big their exposure actually was. And this is a fastly growing company. They sell hardware, not software, but they sell hardware to the federal government, to federal government contractors, and some specifically just commercial clientele. They got a new contract with Nestle, and somebody found out somehow that contract existed. And this government contractor, they had a brand new employee, brand new salesperson. and they were, hot and ready to go ahead and make their first sale. An order came in from Nestle, brand new contract, brand new client. He's going to make his first sale. Super excited about it. They ordered $40,000 of printer cartridges. So he's like, yes, absolutely, send. Was so proud of it. Sent it, went to his boss and said, look, I made a sale. And they're like, great. That didn't go to Nestle. It was somebody else that just happened to find out that they had a contract, sent it in at just the right time, and that the green guy was excited to go ahead and make the sale. So they were out $40,000. And actually, this is another note: if you willingly give away your property, it's a more difficult insurance problem, because if you willingly give something away, it technically wasn't stolen. So that's something else that contractually has to be fixed within the policy. But either way, they didn't have the correct insurance anyway, so they were out. An insurance carrier, CNA Insurance. It's another one that I work with all the time. They're a very large, multinational, multi-billion-dollar insurance carrier. And just a couple of years ago, they had a hack into the system. There was a bug floating around and just mining data for a couple of months, and they finally recognized that they had this problem. They had to shut their entire system down. So it was not only they had a $40 million ransomware bill they had to pay, so they're out $40 million, and then of course they had insurance to pay for some of this, and then it's opportunity cost. I couldn't place any business with CNA for that period of time, for I think it was 2 months, and that goes for anybody else in the United States. I mean, nobody could place anything with them because their system was completely shut down. Another example of business income. So if you have to shut your system down, there's a good chance that you're going to lose a pretty substantial amount of money. SolarWinds is one that came up. Let me go back here. SolarWinds is one that came up a couple of years ago. That was one of the big ransomware attacks. The New York subway has been shut down. India had a power outage. I mean, there's if you Google certain, any case, I mean, you'll have myriad examples of these sort of things pop up. And I'm not trying to be a fear monger. I want everybody to realize that this is, it happens, and nobody's impervious when it comes to this sort of a thing. Even small businesses, there's a staggering number of small businesses that think that they're not subject to being attacked because they're not big enough. And unfortunately, that's not the case. Anybody is susceptible to being attacked. This is one that took place just a matter of a few days ago. And this directly affects everybody in the United States, the United Nations, and NATO. It's a state-sponsored Russian hacking group called Turla. They've actually been in operation since 1996. But this particular bug that they threw onto all of our systems was released in 2003, 2004. So roughly 20 years it's been floating around our systems and mining data. The FBI recently, and again, like I said, this took place a week ago, just a few days ago. The FBI developed something called Perseus, and the program established communications with Snake. Snake is the name of the program. And it issued commands to that program to shut itself down so it could no longer affect the computers. This is a huge catch. Oh, and for those of you that are afraid of snakes, I apologize. I thought it was just a cool picture. This is a great, a great solution to a big problem that we've had for a long time. So it's not just the little private hackers that are going after the United States information. It's state-sponsored hackers from Russia and from China and from, you name our adversaries out there. It's happening pretty much across the board. This is one I usually have some sound effects to go along with this, some Terminator sound effects. But artificial intelligence is something that I'm always asked about these days. And I do insure quite a few people that their entire business is AI, artificial intelligence. And they all have pretty much the same outlook on this. Is it something to be concerned about? Yeah, maybe. Not right now. And the reason being, at this particular time, the information that AI is using, it's only collected off of information that we've created and put out into the ether. So can it learn some to a certain extent, up to the abilities that we've allowed it to learn. But keep in mind, it's a tool, just like any other tool. And I use it as well. I mean, I know entire companies that have automated all of their systems with artificial intelligence. It's a very valuable tool if it's used for the right purpose. A hammer. I mean, you could go buy a hammer right now and build a house, or you could use that hammer to, whack somebody across the head. So any tool could be used for a good purpose or maliciously. And this is my opinion. I think regulation should be written in order to, control what people are actually allowed to do, with this technology. But in my opinion, again, is that this is not something that's going to be halted. I mean, other countries are going to continue to research this. I'm very sure the United States is going to continue to research this as well, and so are private entities. So it's not something that's going to go away, but I think more attention needs to be paid into regulating it and making sure that these bad actors cannot actually, go into action and do something negative. One of the important things that everybody, at least in my little circle, had mentioned is just be aware of what you're sharing. So if you're using Chat GPT, which that subsequently is, I do use Chat GPT every now and then. If you enter like a question in that has sensitive information into it, Chat GPT does store that information, and they do use it for future searches. There is a way to turn that off. I don't know how functional that actually is, but there is a way to go through the options and to disable the sharing function, or the storage of your searches. But just be very careful, just like anything else. Be very careful about any sensitive data that you're harboring. Don't share it with anybody. And this is kind of just a random insurance thought that people have brought up quite a bit. Autonomous vehicles, the insurance carriers don't really know what to do with yet, because there's no law of large numbers, and this is a function of artificial intelligence. So, what if all of a sudden, a hacker gets in and just makes every autonomous vehicle take a left turn all at the same time? Like, how do you account for that? Who's actually to blame? Is it the programmer? Is it the manufacturer? Is it, how do you, where do you actually have fault? And there's no law. There hasn't been any real litigation, maybe some, minor bits here and there, but as, autonomous vehicles become more and more popular, that's going to be an interesting insurance battle. But that's just not really an educational bit, just something that, I find fascinating. And bottom line is Skynet, the Terminator is not coming for us, not yet. They say it's something that, as, quantum computing comes into play and these AIs, they become more and more intelligent, then it might be time to start worrying. But right now is an overwhelming similar response, not something to sweat about right now. And the news does a good job of, stirring the pot on that. But from what I've heard, the experts have told me it's not something to sweat. And a few more, just a little more information. One thing I didn't mention is I do podcasting quite a bit. And I do have some business shows on YouTube. Various topics, and cyber is one of the more popular ones. I do have a website where I have a few articles that I've written. One in particular at the very top here is, cyber criminals love to target small businesses. And it's basic information, basic things to do to try to prevent any of these, any attack like that from taking place. And that is about it. If anybody has any questions, I would love to answer them. Yes.
And full disclosure, I should have mentioned this prior to our presentation, but Bill is actually my insurance broker for Streamline, and I've met a lot of insurance brokers, but I have to say Bill is definitely I have to say he's very knowledgeable, and what I like is he tries to negotiate when he can the contracts with the insurance carrier, just as we try to negotiate terms and conditions with, the primes or subs, etc. So anyway, he has my endorsement.
I appreciate it. And yes, insurance policies are contracts. Yeah, they can be negotiated.
And I think I saw a question coming in the chat.
Can you put your podcast and other info in the chat, please?
Let me share it with you. I don't have that readily available. Unfortunately, it's called Tuesday Morning Live. It's on. You can find it on YouTube. You have to do a little bit of digging, but I will email that to you. I mean, I know I'm going to get the list of people. So Katie, I'll send that information out to you.
Bill, what would you say is, what do you think is the most effective way to circumvent in terms of not having an issue? Like, do you think it's training? Do you think it's having your systems set up, your processes? So have you seen effective ways that companies have at least reduced the chances for a cyber attack?
Work with a very reputable MSA. Find somebody that actually understands, what your exposures are, what could actually happen. Work with the right IT people. If you're a small organization, you can't hire your own CIO, CTO. Find the right company, find the right third party to handle that for you. That's really your first line of defense. And then second to that, find a reputable person to walk you through the whole process of buying cyber liability insurance. That's your second line of defense. I mean, that's really after, the what's already hit the fan. That's how you're going to have to pay for it. So, surround yourself with people smarter than you. I do the same thing. But yeah, if you're working with the right, first line of defense, the right people, they'll be able to help you out with, directing you and the right kind of training and things like that. Training is it's one of the high points as well. It's really important.
All right. Last chance for questions.
Hey, Bill.
Yeah.
Hey, this is Chris with Loudoun County. I had a question for you. Let's say a company is insured and they've got a policy in place, but yet they have a breach, and the forensics team comes in and says, well, you were breached because you didn't patch this front end system. But you've told the insurance company, yes, we do a good job of patching our systems. Is it ever the case where the insurance company comes back and says, you're not covered because you didn't have in place the kind of policies you said you did during the underwriting process?
That's a really good question. So yes and no. And the answer is always, it depends. So number one, you cannot make any misrepresentations on your application, because in most of most cases, your application becomes part of the policy. So if you misrepresent yourself on the application, the carrier can come back and say, you lied, we're not going to cover this. Now, if you are actually taking care of your patching, procedures and all, everything is up to date and something was just missed, then no, they can't back out of it. I mean, because you have not made a misrepresentation. You haven't told a fib. So they do still have to cover it, but make sure that really when you are filling out the application, you're filling it out to the very best of your knowledge. And if you don't have the answer for something, writing NA is fine, or just saying unknown. I mean, that's a fine answer. But just don't say yes if the answer is no.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. Last chance for questions. Going once, going twice. Thank you, Bill. That was a great presentation. And I learned a lot, and I'm going to hand it back to Lindsay.
Thank you, Karen. Government Contractor Chat is held every third Wednesday of each month. Our next webinar, Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, What It Is and Why It Matters, presented by Toby Musser, CEO of MNS Group, will be on Wednesday, June 21st from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Time. You can scan the QR code on the screen now to register for this event and look for our upcoming webinar events that will be added to the calendar soon. Thank you for being with us today.